don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I totally agree with you.
Palace, high above 2919 East Broadway. This is a special edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you live on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app and stream all of our live local shows, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. And we can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today as we continue to create new history and new pathways to enlightenment, as I have tapped into a very special family. One that I, in fact, have never met before, but really I've jumped over the free love flower power movement into the generation of beats and merry pranksters, and one of those guys who was extremely influential as a poet, a writer, a movie producer, just a mind-blowing intellectual was Ken Kesey. And I get a chance today to interview his daughter, Sunshine Kesey. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thanks so much. It's great to be with you.
I just want to talk to you a little bit about, if you could talk about, one of the L's on my show is leadership, and I wanted you to talk about what made your dad a great leader, if you thought he was a good leader. Yeah,
my dad was a natural leader. He quoted my grandpa as saying that, he could draw a crowd in the desert, and and that was a long time ago. When he was still quite young. So I think he had that pretty naturally in his pocket, since high school, when he would be trying to figure out how to create a magical experience at their big dances or at their big theater productions or something. I see pictures of him being quite active, really young in that way, as far as, gathering people together to be creative and try to create something new. And so that was kind of a revelation for me to see that, he'd been at this for a long time, and he just, changed venues.
I love it.
So he just, it just came natural, and I think that his natural good sense, made people feel like he could see the light at the end of the tunnel and would follow him. And sometimes it didn't always work out, but it was always a great experience nonetheless. So he usually would have lots of willing participants in whatever mad caper he was thinking of.
That's perfect. I'm curious as to if you could talk to the audience about, and maybe you've talked to your mother about it as well, is just this idea of a physical free love, self-expression, and the idea that, we have a 50% divorce rate in this country today based on like traditional marriage, but can you talk about the relationship that your father had with your mother, and ultimately, if they worked well together as a couple?
I don't think I ever really saw them as a couple. They were never a couple in my time. He was married and had 3 children, and but the times being what they were, all those little fences around what we do had melted away, and so I think that it wasn't considered a terrible transgression. But I don't think my mom ever assumed that she would have Faye leave. So there wasn't any trying to jockey for position, I don't think. Obviously I wasn't there.
Sure.
It was like a natural expression during high times, and I think the complications showed up later, and which there were many. It wasn't always an easy thing, and I think that a lot of those ideas about free anything did not survive the test of time, because just basic things of whose food is in the fridge, and I don't know, it gets complicated, and So, we were never, like a, commune per se, and I didn't experience my dad and my mom as a couple. They were friends, thankfully, and thankfully Faye was friends with my mom as well. But, we were careful not to step on toes as best we could, and, it's complicated, but it's, I luckily the spirit of friendship and the appreciation for my life being in their life was evident. So that was lucky. They wanted me in their lives, and so I got to be part of the family.
I mean, I was born in 1978, and can you just give the chronology? Like, was Carolyn with Jerry, and then she had a child with Kesey, or did it happen? How did the chronology go?
Gotcha. Well, my mom was part of the whole prankster scene. She was quite young, 18, 19, and fully engaged with all their fun and wackiness. And that's when she was, a full participant and creating these big events. And of course, the Warlocks became the kind of the house band for some of their big events. And I think they had been, checking each other out anyway. But my mom being pregnant and then running off to Mexico with the whole prankster scene when my dad was on the lam from the feds. And
that's right. No, Babs told me that he was on the lam. Yeah, that's right. Right.
And so they all wound up down there, and that's how I ended up getting born in Mexico, along with Babs's daughter Casa. And anyway, so we all came back. Eventually when my dad realized he was, obviously not undercover anymore, and so they all came back, and at that point, I was just an infant. And my dad was having he was stretched thin. There was a lot going on. I think, being on the lam kind of stretched his brain, and he needed to get home. And so he had a big blowout with something. He took the bus and drove to Oregon, and just in a burst of energy, and left my mom and me in San Francisco, and not intentionally us, but just everybody. He just had to get home. And so there's my mom in San Francisco with nothing, no clothes or anything. Everything was on the bus. And so I think she'd been taken in with friends, and then she and Jerry sparked, and the rest is kind of history there. And thankfully, it was a lovely environment for a young woman with a little baby to fall into in the middle of Haight Street, scene. And
wow, I mean, this is a mind-blowing situation. So so your dad he just really was he needed some space, and he just bounced out. I mean, I guess the other question, you may not be able to answer this, but I mean, at the time, was like land really easy to buy in Oregon? I mean, it's astounding to me that that farm was 80 acres. I mean, was there any, like, he was a savvy guy. I mean, all those guys are geniuses. I mean, was it just this I mean, did they realize that? And they also, I think, was it a combination as well that, I mean, you were beginning to get an influx of outsiders into the Bay Area, especially Haight Street area. It was changing the scene, so they kind of just wanted to get out of there. Is that right?
I know. He already had a homestead scene up in Oregon. His family is from here, and I think, it was just that he'd been away for so long, and he had children and a wife and a scene, so he needed to get back to his home. And I think, they probably really put her foot down, and they, I don't know all the details. Probably somebody else has chronicled this better than me.
Mm-hmm.
But, some of these things it's funny, because we learn about a lot of this stuff through the fact that other people do interviews. So a lot of family history, we didn't sit around and talk about it at the dinner table, so, we just went about the future of our lives.
I dig.
So it's funny, we learn about this stuff later in time when I hear an interview or I read a book, and I'm like, oh my God, I had no idea. So it's funny how we learn. Like, I learned stuff listening to the interview that you did with Zane. I'm like, oh wow, I never knew that.
Yeah, so, no, I mean, you got to. I mean, listen. I mean, you got to ask the question. If you're never going to know the answer unless you ask the question, take someone like myself, who's just so combustible and basically just wanting to search. This is just a fascinating. The whole dynamic. Sunshine. Can you talk about your own artistic? I mean, between your mom and your dad. I mean, you're talking about some serious artists, and then you wound up in this extremely artistic, bastion of Haight Street. Can you talk about like your earliest artistic creations and your expressions?
You bet. Yeah, my got so blessed with both my mom and Jerry being super, free spirited about being yourself and being a young person. I got to grow up in a pretty unrestricted environment, and Jerry especially. He did not like to play the parent role at all, which kind of bit him in the ass too. But it was also just great to have a big friend, and so he was like a big kid friend that we would draw and do all kinds of weird little funny things to entertain ourselves. So I think I was really fortunate in that I had two parents at that time that were, fully turned on themselves and interested in exploring and having fun. And I got to kind of just be a little miniature friend with them during that time.
Oh, I love this. This is beautiful.
Yeah, so it was so great. I learned a lot about sense of humor and, all the things, just you learn a lot by being with someone, like what is funny, and thankfully Jerry has an amazing sense of humor. And so I got trained early to discover what was funny. And then, of course, my dad is very similar. So it just kind of, when I started spending more time with my dad, it was an easy transition into more absurdity and fun.
Could you give an example of what was funny, like an example of how Jerry parsed things? I watched some interviews quite a bit later. Just everything he says to me is somewhat profound in the sense that, he was just so well read and he knew a lot. And then inherently, it seemed like both sides of his brain were just working on. They were on fire. And I just Can you give an example, like a memory as a kid of something peculiar or just resourceful that he showed you? Said, you don't need a lot of material stuff to get off.
Right. Oh, Jerry would usually just mostly I don't think he ever quite gave me any like little words of wisdom like grandpa or anything. He would just mostly go and do and come play with me kind of stuff. And so learning to appreciate the things that made him laugh, wanting to make him laugh was a big motivator, so it's like learning someone's sense of humor and what cracks them up is a huge education. And so I think that it's hard for me to actually put any particular little moment in time there, but like we used to, because he would be out so late, oftentimes he would still be awake when I'd get up in the morning.
Really? Wow. What time were you getting up? Like 6 or 6:30?
Yeah, little kid time.
Yeah, right.
And so we'd watch cartoons together. And so he educated me on what good cartoons were. He's like, oh, don't watch that. That's terrible. That's Speed Racer stuff or whatever. It's like, come over, let's watch this Popeye. And so he loved great animation, and so we would draw and do a lot of. Luckily, that's the thing. They just made tons of art supplies available for me and my sisters, and just made sure it was always right there, that we could have fun and explore our imaginations and try to outdo each other with ludicrous stuff and try to crack each other up. Mostly, it was a lot of entertaining of each other, and I feel so thankful for that too. Now, years later, I'm seeing that not everybody has this finely tuned sense of humor. So it's nice when you run into it.
Did you yourself, could you talk about, are you an artist yourself, or what kind
yes.
of, can you talk about your art? 'Cause to me, this is like, you were just marinating in this. I didn't, and also at that point, so let me be clear, you were, from your mom's side, you were the oldest of the kids living in that
right.
house? Okay, so go ahead. Can you talk about your art that you're doing or that you have been doing over the years and just drop some knowledge on us?
You bet. Yeah. No, I got real lucky. I was able to go and learn glass making at a friend's studio down in Southern Oregon.
That's great.
And so I just learned on the job. I mean, I've done all kinds of different art, but I hadn't really sunk my teeth into one particular medium and until I got into the glass work. And it was really fun because it was something my parents knew nothing about, and they could not offer any big lectures on how to do it better, which was really good. And it kind of scares my mom. She doesn't even like to get too close to the heat. So it's kind of funny, it was like two of the most powerful people, and I found something that they don't know anything about, can't tell me about. So, so I got into glass making, and I really just took to it. It's really addictive because it's so immediately gratifying. Whereas I'd done, a lot of drawing and painting and clay sculpting and stuff, which takes time. You won't be done for like 2 weeks sometimes, a month. And whereas with glass, you're done in like an hour with that one piece, and you'll see it in the morning, after it comes out of the oven. And that's super gratifying for my kind of ADD brain. I like to see my results real fast. And I've just enjoyed really brilliant psychedelic colors. I don't think you'll be surprised there.
Fantastic stuff. I mean, the ADD brain I can completely relate to as well. But would you consider it something that has it been a livelihood for you? Art?
It was for a while, and it was really hard work being a craftsperson. I have to say it was, and but I took time off of it. I had a big life change when my dad got sick, and I moved everything up to Eugene to be with my family, and so things kind of turned around backwards, and now I'm kind of actually just finally getting back into it again wholeheartedly. I had been just helping other people and working at other studios, and just kind of had backed off from the whole endeavor of running my own business. And then, things have been flush, and I've been able to just kind of cruise along and just be available for my family, which has been great. I have an elderly grandmother. My dad's mom just turned 100. And I've been pretty committed to trying to be there for her, because for a long period of time when I was in my glass business, I was away from home and missed a lot, And then my dad passed away, and I was like, I missed a ton of my family, So I just kind of made a life change.
No, I dig. I mean, I think I saw Babs posted something about a letter that President Obama sent to your grandmother 100 years.
I know.
That's so that's so cool. I don't know how he got tipped off on that. That's pretty cool, man.
Oh, we have some inside
sure.
connections. It's pretty sweet. It's very sweet. We live a really charmed life. I'm so thankful that we've been treated so well by, the general public, and just that we've experienced so much love within our big collective family here too. It's really been great.
Talking to Sunshine Kesey here on the Jake Feinberg Show, trying to keep everything straight. She's really had quite an interesting experience and trip, so to speak. Can you nowadays there's, being a father too, I know it. It's like, a festival comes up or some gig, something in the same vein as what might be happening at the time when you were a kid. But did your mom did you guys wind up doing a lot of family stuff in the sense that if Jerry had a gig, you would go, like, she wasn't really all that worried about taking you to this gig, whether it was at the Lion's Den or whether it was, the Keystone or, even if it was the Old and in the Way stuff. I mean, can you talk about the first, when you started to see your dad on the bandstand? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. When you started to see Jerry on the bandstand. I'm sorry.
From the minute I think from the minute, that's like infant times. I don't think, my mom didn't keep me away from it. It was, I think at the time it was just considered the most safe and loving place anywhere. And So I grew up at Grateful Dead shows and all those other bands, New Riders in the Purple Sage, and all of our extended family. Those musical events always felt completely like a safe place for kids. So I had full run of the place. I was one of the oldest kids too. So I was one of the first little rock and roll babies in our group. So I was kind of head of the show there for a little while, and I get bossy and I run all the other little kids around. And so there was like a little scene. It wasn't, I see now that is kind of unusual, but at the time it felt totally natural because we're like a traveling circus and everybody travels together. It's just natural that you bring your kids, your dogs, the whole works, because your home is the road. And so you have to bring what you want in your home with you. And so that went for a while. We went on the road a lot. And but later in time, as there was more kids and things got a little bigger and crazier and the road was longer, I think we stayed home more. And then later in time, Annabelle would just go out on the road with Jerry by herself. And but that was, she was 12 and it was considered, okay and safe. Like there was a group. It was like a huge village that would look after your kid, And so, I used to just run around in those big halls, at 4 years old, out in the audience, trucking around by myself. I knew where the stage was. I knew how to find my folks. I loved running around and having a good time and getting into mischief and tripping the spinners and doing whatever I could to have fun.
How just from a sociological point of view, because you lived through such a, we have this era now. I have, one daughter who's 11 and the other one is 4.5. And I don't want to criticize mothers or fathers, but, you have these helicopter moms now who are just, all over the place. How... People say, well, I remember I just interviewed Justin Kreutzmann, who was probably one of those young kids that you were bossing around at one point. And it was like, he was like, it was the 70s. You could open the back door, walk down the street and you never had to worry. And I don't know why. And I say to myself, is it just that we hear about this stuff instantaneously and we hear about it all the time because our media is obsessed about these kinds of, how have we gotten from the point where Sunshine Kesey's tripping the spinners in the Fillmore or the wherever, Winterland or whatever, to the point now where it's like you can't even do you can't create family communal stuff anymore. To the point of 30, 40, 50 people. Can you riff on that?
Yeah, I see a big lack of that myself, and I'm real sorry for that. I just realized we're being sold a bill of goods of how fearful we should be about this planet that we live on. And I don't agree, but on the other hand, I don't have children. So I haven't really been put to the test and seen what I would do, what I would trust these days. You just have to build your kids really self-sufficient, I think, and because when they do get out on their own, they better have common sense and some sense of self-defense. But most people don't even challenge their kids with that kind of ability. So I don't know. I think we're crippling ourselves by keeping us too safe. And unfortunately, I'm seeing a lot of children, young people who are really clueless.
Right. Well, that's
clueless.
that's the overarching point. Is like, it's the idea of just. And I don't want to paint with a broad brush because it's not happening everywhere, but I just see younger parents, excuse me, you don't have, families used to be 8 to 10, 12 kids so they could work the farm, and then slowly it shrunk to 4, now it's down to 2, maybe 1. So they've almost become commodities in some ways. And I look at the situation with the Grateful Dead and the Merry Pranksters, and, it was just so... It seemed like today it would be demonized as some kind of awful thing, in the sense that it was like so free and so much fun, and nobody somehow how could people possibly let their kids just do that? And It's an interesting. Even if you don't have kids, it doesn't matter. You know it because you. I mean, do you believe that in some way that it did embolden you and give you some self-sufficiency by having that freedom and not having people pestering you or your mother nagging you to stay close to her or don't leave my eyesight or stay here. I mean, I walked in this morning to drop my daughter off, and there was a mother with a young baby and a son, and the son just walked through the door, was running away from her, and she's like, Sebastian, if you don't come back here, we're going to have to do this all over again. It's like, I mean, it's like it's like herding cats or something.
That's right. Training animals.
Right.
And, yeah, I don't know. I like I said, I don't have children, so it's like I try not to pontificate too much about that, but I'm sad to see, the effect that we're seeing on children, to be raised in a world of fear and restricted movement, and made to feel like your life force is too much, and all this taking of Ritalin and squishing down all this life force. Basically, I don't know. It's not making healthy monkeys out of us, that's for sure.
No, absolutely not.
So, I'm all for these bigger gatherings like Country Fair here at, in Oregon at the Eugene, outside of Eugene is the Oregon Country Fair. And it's kind of an awesome holdout from the 60s old Renaissance fair that has kind of evolved into just a giant family of folks who put on this big event every year. And it has that same element where people feel safe to let their 12-year-olds run around wearing fairy costumes at night and make friends and, show up back at camp when they're ready to go to sleep, which is great. But there's always going to be the dark side out there too, unfortunately. And so every kid should just be a little bit more of a survivor. I wish that they were given more chances to test their strengths in these departments, because they're not given the chance to grow any wings. I'm not sure what to say about it, except for more big gatherings like this where kids can, get away from their parents and go run around and have some responsibility for themselves.
Yeah, I think also, there was no real liability or litigation. We were such a litigious society now that
right.
Everyone's on pins and needles about it. But I wanted to. It's funny. I literally had breakfast with Peter Rowan yesterday, and he was talking about.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I was talking about his daughter Amanda was writing a book about being backstage, and she talked to you about it, and just sort of living that lifestyle. But when I interviewed Peter a few years ago, he talked about. Mountain Girl, or your mother, Jerry, at some point you guys moved out to Stinson Beach, and
right.
And because it was the scene in Haight-Ashbury was getting too much, was getting crazy, and you had this influx of Midwesterners, everyone was coming in, and slowly it seemed that what Peter referred to it as the phantom ship. The Grateful Dead, just relying on Jerry for, a contingent of 50 to 70 people that would go slightly off the coast. But then when it was needed the most, they'd have to come back and snatch him up and take him off. And when in fact his true passions were things like learning about the guitar and playing with Merle, playing with Olden in the way. And I remember Peter specifically saying that your mom said it was really, really, really good for him. And he loved it. And I just wanted you to talk a little bit about that time in your life when you moved out of the Haight and when you went to Stinson Beach. And, if you could even detect if your dad was, eventually the Dead took a break in 75, but it seemed like already there was, the question is, did Jerry feel the weight of the world because of this huge operation known as the Grateful Dead? And essentially he was, bottom line, setting the musicianship aside. Sorry, we got dogs so fired up right now. But because, basically here's the bottom line. Jerry Garcia, he put butts in the seats on top of being just an amazing musician. Nobody else could do that. Everyone relied on him. Can you talk about the weight of that and how you saw that over your childhood?
Well, it took me a while to figure that out, actually. I didn't realize quite how deified Jerry had become, because I was living right in the lap of it all, just in the, just in that hierarchy of the Grateful Dead. I didn't, I was young. I didn't realize that one of the band members was more important than the other. And they would never acknowledge that anyway. It was not something that we just, I don't know, that was not something we talked about or anybody pinpointed. But later, in time, I started to notice that and go, oh, okay, I'm starting to see that people are really into Jerry, like way more into Jerry than like one of the other band members. I didn't understand that at first. I didn't see that there was some differences to that. And, and now I'm, like watching Game of Thrones or something, I'm starting to see it's like, oh my gosh, there was so much like political jockeying going on trying to get next to Jerry. And I just was oblivious to a lot of it, but in time I started to see that it really, he was a little beset about, with these people wanting his attention. And I saw that it was really great for him to have peace and quiet and be able to do wholesome things where he got to just revel in fun and music and just be a good old boy. And that whole bluegrass time was a really just halcyon time for me, just beautiful. Things were just good and dogs were roaming around and, it's just real wholesome. It was just good, clean fun.
I mean, do you remember, cause I mean, Rowan was talking about this shiftless life they were living there. And, in the morning, David Grisman and him would roll up to, they'd start playing and he's like, hey, Jerry lives up the road and plays bluegrass.
Right.
I mean, do you have memories of those cats just jamming out at that?
Yes. No, like I said, that is like one of the highlights of my childhood. I loved that. It was very different than going to the Grateful Dead shows or even to, rehearsals or something. Being in our living room, totally different. And just unplugged and, just having a good time. They were just really grooving. And I think, even as a kid, I found that entrancing, and I would sit and listen for hours. I just loved it. I loved him playing banjo. And it was just such happy, fun music, and it was just a pleasure to hear things unplugged and people singing without microphones. It's just real soul food. And I definitely, I'm so grateful I got to experience that, because it's definitely something I draw on as far as my love of music, my love of my childhood, the love of my stepfather, just the love of Stinson Beach, all of that stuff. That gives me, so much juice to go on in life, and it really informs me today. Just that is possible. Those kind of groovy situations are possible, and I'm always aiming to be there. Create something similar or be part of something similar. So that those times gave me a flavor that I'm always searching for. If you could, like, remember a time when it dawned on you that Jerry became this, even though it was not wanted, he was being deified, and you realized that people were looking at him as somebody, not even as a real human being, but a god? Oh gosh. Well, we had some crazies, that would show up at the house. And so, obviously at the shows, it was, there's going to be some hardcore fans, and they're going to stand at the backstage gate and, shove little notes into the kids' hands. Oh, God, please, please, please give this to Bobby. Please give this to Jerry. And so we were receptacles for some of that vibe, and at the time it just seemed, silly. It's like, oh, brother, are these people out of their heads, And but as time went on and I started to see, more intense obsession kind of focused on Jerry, I started to see that there's kind of a dark side to this, and that it's not all great. And I'm only seeing a smidgen of it, and he's on the road all the time, and he must get confronted with it a lot, and that made me have more compassion for him. I hadn't quite realized, quite how weird people could be. and having them come to your door at 4 a.m. and beat on it, and where's Jerry? Where is he, my cosmic brother? And
right, love does some really crazy things. But I think it's just cool. Like the other, going back to this protective mentality, that Jerry wasn't living at that time. He wasn't living in a gated community. He didn't have a security guard. I mean, he was accessible. I mean, that's the
true.
point, is that he, even though some people might consider it a drag, and there's plenty of rock stars and luminaries that are assholes, Jerry always was just so. I never saw the band. I just love Jerry, love his disposition and the whole thing, and he was just always very gracious and took the time, even if it was a drag. But yet, I mean, aside from guys like Parish, he didn't really have any bodyguards or anything like that. I mean, he just let himself be accessible,
Right. And my dad did the same thing. So I kind of wonder if they didn't, have similar conclusions about how to be, the artist that you are on this planet, and, be responsible to that, I don't know. It's like they were similar in that conclusion. I think that, being as psychedelic as they were, and, they experienced a lot in a small amount of time, and probably wised up to a lot of stuff in a small amount of time, back in the, late 60s. And
what do you think they wised up to? I think you're right, but
I think just deciding who they were going to be, as far as open consciousness, open to learning and open to the magic of the moment, and the oracle of the moment, to not shut that down, to not shut out that possibility. And so that's kind of my supposition. I don't know. I think that they were similar in their consciousness as far as what they had achieved, and decided that they were going to be available for, I don't even know what to call it, just available for that magical now moment. And that's kind of, your responsibility as a higher consciousness. Not higher to any, not higher as in comparison to other people, but just higher in themselves.
Absolutely. No, I think you nailed it. When did you get close with Zane?
When I started going to the farm, I was probably about 5. My first big stay with my Kesey family was when the Grateful Dead went to Europe for 1972.
Absolutely.
And so my mom wanted to go, so she figured that maybe this is a good time for me to go stay with my Kesey family, and Annabelle stayed in Marin with I think Richard and Elaine Lauren. And so she went on and had a merry time in Europe, and I was on the farm with my Kesey family, which was kind of a culture shock, I have to say. I was used to getting my way. I was a little rock and roll kid. I could do whatever I wanted anytime, wear whatever I wanted, didn't have to brush my hair. I was a little savage. And coming up to Oregon was this big shock. I had to comb my hair and wear shoes and stuff. And Zane and I, he was kind of my protector, in that he was the big brother. And it was a scene, though. I mean, I was definitely the youngster amongst a bunch of kids, and we were all very unsupervised a lot of times. So, the natural things happen. The shit rolls downhill, and the youngest usually gets shit on pretty hard.
Yeah, I mean that definitely. And I mean, how many were there? It was Jed and Zane. And
then my oldest sister, Shannon. She's the oldest of my dad's kids, actually.
Shannon. Shannon.
Yeah, she's adopted.
Wow.
And Zane and her they're so close in age that everybody thought they were twins. And and they're both blonde, and so a lot of time everybody thought they're twins, but in fact, Faye didn't know that she was going to be able to carry to full term. She, had trouble before, and so they adopted a little girl that had been born down the road from them, and we're having this young child, and this is while my dad was at Stanford down in California, and of course then 6 months later Faye was pregnant and carried Zane to full term. So just her having another baby in the house, I guess, helped her have a baby. And so anyway, 3 children there. But then at the farm, there was always, some hangers on. Some other kids would be there for a week or two, or, in the summer especially, of course. But there was always some pile of kids there. So it wasn't always just my siblings. It was, other kids, my cousins or whomever. It was fun. It was great. We had there was a lot going on. And it, like you said, there was no helicoptering going on at that time. So we were, alone to our own devices a lot, unless we were being put to work. And, whereas the adults were busy doing what they were doing. And so we got away with a lot, but we were very creative. We got to have fun. And there was only 2 channels on TV. So there's, and we were not allowed to watch TV while the sun was out. So,
do you feel like that was that Europe 72, was that the first time that you had a chance to really spend time with your real dad?
That's right.
Can you talk about that? Can you talk about that feeling, or like that? That's a pretty tripped out, especially when you're coming from a pretty monster cat like Jerry. But I mean, then you go to a bigger cat like Ken. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. When I first arrived at the farm. Well, first they picked me up down in California, and then brought me up to Oregon. So it was a little road trip too, and getting to know everybody there. And I loved my dad. I immediately was super connected to him, and so I didn't feel like I had been just dropped at nobody's house. I felt connected, and but I was pretty young. I mean, that's a big change for a 5-year-old. And so I went through a lot of stuff, but I had to suck it up, and just and that was part of it too, was just learning my own self-sufficiency at that age.
But here's the question: did you know at that young an age? Could you grasp the concept that he was your biological father?
Yes. I grasped that.
You did,
and
okay.
and part of it was a little bit, I was a little shocked, because at that time I was like, oh my God, my dad is Bozo the Clown. I didn't know quite how to take it, because his hair was really out, at each, really long on each side,
sure.
and orangey,
yep.
And he wore these crazy shoes, and I had been watching Bozo the Clown on TV in California, and I was like, oh my God,
that's him. That's it.
My dad is Bozo the Clown.
Oh, that is true.
So, that took a little getting used to.
But do you feel like, like over the time, you got to have a very, how do you feel, could you evaluate your relationship with your dad? Like, you feel like you had some really good single bonding moments. He had, obviously he had a lot on his plate, and he did a lot of tripping and touring and traveling, and but looking back, you can say you guys had a good relationship.
Oh, certainly. I mean, he really valued family and really loved children. So it was natural that he would, make a big effort to make that connection. And so we would sit and draw together. It was an easy transition in the fact that it was similar to being with Jerry and my mom, in that, it was very creative. My dad really wanted me to learn to do cartooning. So we would sit there and swap back and forth and do pen and ink drawings together, or write a little story. He would write a story and I would illustrate it. That kind of stuff. He was engaging. He wanted that kind of relationship with his kids, and because I think he was busy so much that when he was home, he wanted to play with the kids, and thank God we had a great time. And he was real creative, and he really inspired us to be creative. Go out and Zane was great. He would make all kinds of interesting stuff, because he, being older and smart, he would make all this really cool stuff that would inspire the younger kids to try.
Right.
Making big marble chutes or mazes in the hay pile, or, crazy tracks in the long grass. We'd mow out these mazes in the hayfield, and, just stuff to keep us entertained. And I realize now, not everybody is that inventive or creative, and we got real lucky with that. And I think Ken, he wanted that out of us. He would praise us for that kind of stuff. So we would try to, gain his approval by doing interesting, weird, creative stuff. And it's left quite a pile of things that we all created, which is really nice.
No, I mean, I know Zane, the original prankster bus was basically his fort during childhood. You played in that bus?
That's right.
You played in that bus a lot?
Yeah, oh gosh, yeah. That bus, it had a lot of different lives led in there. For a while, it was the sheep barn for a little while.
Really?
Sheep would go in there.
Wow,
Yep, because
wow.
the door was open and they'd get out of the rain in there, and and then during crazy parties that Zane and his friends would throw out there, I'd sit on the bus and I'd hear the frat boys talking to the sorority girls saying, "Oh yeah, this was the bus that Jimi Hendrix drove," and it would be all dark with a candle in there. They'd be telling these really far out yarns about what the bus had done, and I just couldn't believe my ears. It was really funny.
Can you?
So,
there's one thing I want to ask you about, because it's fascinating. It's always fascinated me. Is that eventually that was the other thing about after Olden and the Way and those Jerry kept kind of becoming more and more, because of the attention on him and the way that he was deified and the pressures of that. He kept kind of needing more and more space. And eventually, you and your mom moved up to Oregon. But then, did you go to their wedding in 1981 on New Year's Eve?
I don't remember it. I don't think so. I was out running around. I was at the show.
You were at the show. Yeah, you were.
Right.
Okay. So you weren't, because there was this whole thing about, what I read was that she wanted to marry Jerry for the tax purposes or something along those lines. But then they had this ceremony at the Oakland Coliseum on New Year's '81, and I'm like, and so you were down there, but you didn't go. You didn't take part in the ceremony?
No, I was probably out running around somewhere. We didn't have cell phones then.
No. No.
And I think it was one of those things that they had kind of pulled together, and it all happened. The whoever officiated it or whatever. It just all pulled together at the moment, and there was no pre-plan as far as I know. But I was just out gallivanting. I don't know. I missed it.
When did you really get on the dead bus? I mean, where you locked in and said, "This is a ball." Like, not only are these guys, not only is it a party, but because I always look back as I chronicle. I mean, I've interviewed 500 musicians from all over the musical spectrum, and the thing about the Dead, I mean, and I'm not saying that I don't want to be a hypocrite, because if I was alive during that time, I'd probably be going there for the party too. But I think that what really got overlooked was the fact that these guys were phenomenal, or turned into phenomenal musicians. They were really good.
Right.
Right. And I think a lot of the audience, and eventually became even more magnified as they became stars, that people were there because it was a party. And
right.
When did you recognize the fact that as a band, when did you get on the bus as the band, as musicians, not for the party, but to say, wow, these guys, like, you looked forward to certain tunes? I mean, can you point? Was
right.
it late '70s? When was that?
Actually, it's quite a bit later. I was probably like 18 or 19 at a show in a ski area. Gosh, I can't think of where it is. Oh my God,
I know where it is. No. 1983, Park City, Utah. Is that possible?
No, it'd have to be a couple years later.
Oh, okay. So maybe Telluride, maybe
something like that.
Right.
Yeah, I've forgotten,
Uh-huh.
but it was. I would go to the parties because it was a party, like you say, and then walking around this bowl, the ski bowl there, and I suddenly stereo hit me, it hit me, the stereo of it all. Like, oh, yeah, I was in the perfect sweet spot, and all the music just immobilized me. I swear to God, it was the weirdest experience. And I was just trucking along trying to find my friends, and then suddenly I was in the sweet spot. And I never experienced that before. I'd never experienced it with my own stereo. I didn't even really know about that, and the whatever it was, the wind or whatever, and the way the mountain was, I just stood right in the spot, and it all just got perfect right there for a minute. And I could hear every note, and it was just incredible. And I just stood there transfixed. And suddenly, with this dumb look on my face, I'm like, oh my God, I'm just like all these other dumb hippies. I've been got.
Right, but you were marinating. You were locked in. I mean, to me, it was like, I don't know. I can understand people. I mean, I can understand the frustration of having to deal with these people, these fanatics.
Right.
But
right.
Man, I mean, I don't know if I would have wanted to see the band in the in the mid '90s when there were teleprompters and things. I mean, just to me, it was like that the prodigious amount of live touring, and I think that honestly, the fact that they could basically survive and tour. Most bands, they make an album and then they go out and they tour and they play all these new songs for their audiences. And the Dead, right, for like 7 years in the 80s, they didn't even make an album, but they were playing right, tunes that eventually came out on Touch of Grey. That to me is like, that's built to last. I mean, that's right, just, that's ridiculous. And,
right,
can you just, backing up your mom, what, in your mind, what is her legacy to this family? I mean, to me, she flies below the radar a lot. She's on the board of the Rex Foundation. She had how many children did she had 3 children. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. And then ultimately, literally, I can't imagine how painful it must have been to see Jerry, I mean, in that 83, 84 period. I mean, just almost basically, he should have been dead. I don't know how he even continued to live. And
Isn't
I don't.
That something?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, for some reason, I've gravitated. Maybe it's because I just always am. I guess the Dead's music in the 70s to me was so pretty and perfect. It's almost annoying. And then by the early 80s, Brent coming into the band, electronics, this new version of the band, and even though Jerry's physical condition was horrible, right, it was like, you know what? The dude came to play every night, and his voice might have been shot, but his playing did not. In fact, I think it was some of the best playing he's ever done in his life. Yet I do know that he would call and talk to you guys or his daughter, his biological daughters, I think, and maybe even pass out on the phone. He was just.
Oh yeah.
Can you talk about that? I mean, that must have been bizarre. Can you please talk about that?
Sure. I mean, I haven't really spoken to too many other people who've grown up, with an addict, but it's something. Every person's different, of course, but. Jerry obviously loved music so much that's where he lived. That's where he breathed. He was out of water when he wasn't, playing and plugged in and doing that. So even in his worst condition, he would have been worse off if he wasn't playing. And it's always been a marvel to me that he would, that he had, at first I thought it was a work ethic. I was like, oh my God, even somebody this blasted is going to show up to work. It's amazing. Like, right, what kind of work ethic? But then I realized it's not work ethic, really. It was more that he just couldn't exist without it. It was like more of an addiction than an addiction. And
that's very good. Well, it's very well. I mean, a lot of musicians, whether they're addicted to drugs or not, they say if they don't play, they would die. So that's the truth. Yeah.
So I think that's really what kept him going and, pushed him beyond human normal positions. And he wanted to continue pulling those strings out of his guts. I mean, he did it for himself and for everybody else, and left an amazing pile of music behind him. And, it's so great that they did it so, backwards, and, would just play live and let people record them, and then pull out an album later after they polished everything up as much as they wanted. They did it backwards. They did it their way. And it's, something to be proud of, just to be that, backwards and contradictory.
I agree. No, and I actually think
I
don't think anything was not premeditated. I mean, if you listen to early versions of Touch of Grey or Throwing Stones, like they tried to go into the studio in '84, but Jerry was, they were disjointed. They were going to actually make the album then. And
right.
and then it never happened. And as fate would have it, they actually, by the time '87 came around, for better or for worse, however you want to look at it, they had this tune that they had been playing live for 5 years that doesn't sound anything like what they were playing, but they turned it into this studio phenomena, and it blew the band into a whole new portal of, like, international popularity that they had never seen before. But it's just that you can't plan that stuff.
Right.
I mean,
you can't plan that Jerry would fall into a coma and have that kind of experience, where he would have a rebound too, he could have just croaked and that would have ended the whole thing,
Well, actually, I think in some ways I'm actually, somebody just trying to chronicle this stuff, looking back, I'm so happy he did come out, because I think he needed that last 9 years to cement his legacy. I think he would have.
I do too.
It would have been really a disaster if he had not pulled out of that, or even.
I agree. No, he would have been an unsettled spirit, and he had a lot more to give. Even though at the time I was angry, that so many of the fans were so adamant that he had to live for them. At the time I was young, and it really pissed me off. I just was like, man, this guy. He's not here for you guys.
Yeah, he's my. Exactly. You lose sight of it. He's just a human being and he's my stepdad, and he's a father.
Right,
and
somebody I care about a whole bunch. Just as a human. Just as a creature in my family. Just somebody I want to care about. And so it's been an interesting experience having to share that kind of closeness with so many people. On both sides, actually, with my dad too. It's been when they both passed away, having to share that with the whole world has been an interesting experience, because we kind of, as a family, kind of lost out on our own intimate goodbye, and that kind of bothers me still, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Can you? I mean, you mean as far as your dad is concerned, you didn't have a chance to have an intimate family goodbye for him?
Right, and I'm not taken away from what the ceremony we did, and everything was fantastic, but it was with a lot of people.
Right.
And so,
right. I see what you're saying. I see. Yeah.
Our immediate family didn't have a time to sit down and do our own private thing, and I look, now that I've gone to a bunch of different funerals of other people and gone, oh my God, that is so sweet and so, tender, this whole private family thing, so much more stuff was addressed, and I feel like we kind of missed out a tiny bit on our ability to come together as a family, the smaller portion of our family.
I'd love to pick up on part two. I don't want to keep you any more longer. Just one final question is to go back and talk about your mom's legacy to this Grateful Dead family, or just in general, the family in general. Can you paint the picture on her? Because she was there from the beginning, and
right.
and just if you want to riff on that, that'd be great.
Well, my mom, she's a powerful person, a powerful personality, and she luckily has a real good sense of family too, and not just immediate family, but our big tribal family. And she has done so much to kind of knit all this stuff together and keep it knitted together. She even though she, being the ex, got pushed away quite a bit, and because the dreaded exes, and but she, being who she is, kind of pushy and doing what she wants, and making sure that her girls had access to their dad and to access to the scene and be, included in the family. She really made that happen, whereas I would have been more shy probably and just backed away and said, whatever, if I'm not invited, I'm not coming. But she made things happen, and she continues to make things happen, and she kind of keeps the soul of the village somewhat together, I guess. I don't know. I'm sure everyone has different points of view, but I know that this last year with the 50th anniversary of the whole Grateful Dead thing, she made a big move to make sure that all the, folks who were part of the Grateful Dead since, for years and years and years were invited where they hadn't been invited. And she was like, man, I'm buying the tickets. I don't care what happens. These people have to be there. This is not right. And so I got to see her in full action last year, really being a true matriarch to our group. And I'm real proud of her for that. She makes people uncomfortable like my dad did. She would do stuff that, was pushing the bounds. And as a kid, sometimes like, oh God, I'm embarrassed. I can't believe it's happening. But then at the end of the day, she has pulled off something so cool and made something happen that nobody else would have done, just by being pushy and and going there and, knocking on that door or calling that person that other people would be too shy to call and say, no, you have to talk to their people. You can't just call them directly. It's just like bullshit. I'm going right there right now.
I just, this is so fast. It's funny, as a total outsider, I have had some really fascinating experiences with trying to just even access other members of the Grateful Dead. To me, have there always been handlers? Like, you're just making it, you're sort of blowing my mind now in the sense that your mom's tenaciousness just pushed that stuff through, because it almost seems now that these, it makes me, Bobby aside, really, you take the other members of the band, and I can't get to them. I can't even get to them. They're like cut off from it. And it's like, that's why for your mom to say, no, these people were part of this community. That's what I don't want to lose sight of here, because the other musicians have gone off and done their solo careers and they do whatever they want. And just, I don't really think that they know in some way that they're in a bubble. And I don't think they're really aware of how cut off they really have become. In some ways, I really believe that they have become completely cut off from what they're, and maybe that happens over, maybe that happens over time. But I'll tell you, it took a lot of guts to do that in real time for your mom to do that, because it's just sort of, and it creates this whole thing about what I've just tried to do with my whole radio show throughout, is just to humanize people, because they're just human beings. That's all they are. And
exactly.
They're nothing
and
more than that.
We're all trying to make a good time here.
Right. And ultimately, are you going to uplift or are you going to tear down? And so it's fascinating. But your mom, she was at the show. She had a positive experience there. Chicago?
She had a great time. Yeah, it was just really fun to see her in her full glory, because she was really, she wasn't going to play by the rules, and she was going to make whatever she thought needed to happen. And it was such a crazy tornado of stuff going on during those shows in California and in Chicago. But she really wanted to have, Big Steve be invited. He hadn't been invited. There was a lot of people that she was like, man, these people, if they're not invited, that is a terrible crime against our whole scene. And so she just made it her business. And my younger sister, Trixie, was like, oh, my God, you can't be doing this. You're rocking the boat. My mom was like, I don't care about the boat.
Yeah, right. I've been rocking the boat for decades,
Exactly. So, I even admire my mom even more now after that whole experience. It was quite eye-opening. And, she won't back down, because she knows her place in all of this. And I'm real proud of her.
Well, I'm not going to back down either. I don't even have a place in this whole thing, but I'm not backing down either. I'm going to go after these cats. These cats have they got nothing to hide, and
right.
And so, Sunshine, I had a ball with you. We've been cooking for about an hour and 5 minutes here.
All right.
And
thank you so much.
And it was really fun, and let's just stay in touch,
Right on. Thank you, Jake. Thanks for pulling all these story strings out for everybody to check out. I really appreciate it.
Hey, all I can say is just keep support, keep pushing forward, and keep helping me drive the consciousness forward. It's cats like your family and the lineages there that will continue to move our whole society forward. So thank you.
That's right. All right. Well, maybe we'll be dancing next to each other someday.
Absolutely. No doubt about it.
All right.
Cheers, friend. Later on.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So we just heard from Sunshine Kesey, another of the clan. A little interesting here. Carolyn Garcia, her mountain girl, is her mother. Ken Kesey is her biological father. She spent a good deal of time with her stepdad, Jerry Garcia, and had a lot of knowledge and information. We'll continue on this pilgrimage tomorrow with Barry Schlesh and David Nelson. And that's it. Having a ball on the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll now rejoin Jim Parisi in progress.
Dugout, when you look at Francona, you see it to some degree on the playing field. When you look at the connection and the guys from the Cubs like Lester